like me. It looks just like me. It looks just like me. Oh my God.
This is a really big deal. There's something that I didn't understand about like how this whole thing for a long time until I was in esports. I always wondered why people like Riot Games was the one that I was really interested in, because when I was running CLG, I was like, why doesn't Riot have skins for every single team? And why don't they have skins for every single player? Seems like really dumb that they don't do this. And then I sat down with a pretty high-ranking Riot member, and I talked to them about this, and they told me, dude, okay, and this is pre-franchising, keep in mind. They're like, think about this, okay? We make a skin for Team Dignitas, and it's in the game, and people buy it, which means they own it. And then a year later, they get relegated, and they're out of the league. What do you do? And it's like, I never thought about things this way. So a lot of people, I think they wonder why companies like Epic Games and Riot, like, they don't put people's skins in and stuff like this. This is why, right? Is like, let's say that Ninja just is like, I hate Fortnite. I'm never going back to it. I'm quitting. I'm never playing it again. Right? Like, so you have to be really, really sure of your partnerships. And to me, getting a skin like this in the game for Ninja, this is like getting something in the Smithsonian. That's actually what it is, right? It's not as simple as a partnership deal with Epic Games, because if it was, then Epic Games would just do that for everything, and they might have these limited time runs. But the challenge that Epic Games has, if you give something to somebody and they buy it, then they own that product. So you don't want to have a bunch of skins of like previous influencers in your game, because your game is going to span 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. Influencers might span 1 year, 2 years. So Ninja getting a skin in Fortnite, this is not like, there's a couple of things here that I think a lot of people are going to miss. Number one, this is not a new thing. This isn't something that people have just like thought about now and is going to be a trend going forward. And number two, it's not going to be a trend going forward, I don't think, because I do think it's very high risk for publishers to do something like this. And that said, like when Ninja gets a skin like this is really cool. It's like him getting to the Smithsonian. He's made history, because what Epic Games is saying is it's like, you've done enough for our game. You're enough of a representative for our game that we are going to put you in our game regardless of what your content is going to be in the future and regardless of what your popularity is going to be in the future. We want you to live as an immortal in our game because you've done that much to actually grow the game and you are that iconic. That's how important that is. And that's why you don't see like Riot Games or like other esports teams actually like it would make sense to me, I think, to give like an Alistar Aphromoo skin or something like that, like for League of Legends, right? Because like Aphromoo is one of the iconic people of League of Legends. He's spent years, he's the longest serving person in the LCS, I think. And I'm pretty sure that's right. One of, if not, right? Like maybe like Doublelift is on that list too. There's Bjergsen maybe, right? But it's very, very few. And the reason why, one of the actual big reasons for the league to franchise and for a lot of people to franchise was because they wanted to be able to utilize assets for teams that they could be reasonably sure were there later, right? And now this is kind of crazy too, because esports is actually so volatile as an industry that even with franchising, sometimes teams disappear, like Echo Fox. So there are actually instances that even with franchising, teams disappear. Then all the assets you had for Echo Fox, like it's very weird to have like a bunch of fans that are in your game that are putting up like an emote from like 4 years ago. And the people that are, there might be people that are saying like, oh, like that doesn't seem like a big deal to me, but you have to think at scale. Like what happens when you have like 20 teams that are dead and there's all these people like spamming emotes and skins for them? Right? Like these are, you're representing brands that literally don't exist anymore. And you can't easily remove those things from your game, because if you do, then like people are going to get like super butt mad because you've eliminated those things from the game that they should have. So when I looked at this ninja, the ninja skin, I was like, damn, this is iconic. And here's the thing that I'll say about Ninja, which is the greatest compliment that I can ever pay to any influencer. Ninja, this is iconic of a person who has transcended influencer status. He has moved from being a gamer, like a gamer influencer, into being a celebrity. And it wasn't with this move that he did that. It was really his appearances on like Leno and Ellen. It was those things that like sort of moved him beyond that. And there are I talk a lot about marketing on this show. There's a lot of aspects of marketing that we talk about on this show. There are still a lot of things about marketing that I don't understand. And one of the things that I really don't get is that insane crossing of that chasm. It's like passing through the land of the living and dead. Like it's like going. It's insane. Some people know that I like to show people the marketing curve, which is like this picture, and it's like, okay, like over here in this like 15% are gamers still, and gamers are crossing this chasm because like right here is this sort of like chasm that you have to cross over. And as a gaming brand that's like endemic to gaming, it's really difficult to cross over this chasm. And then there are some gamers now in this, but like still like the conservatives and like the, people on Twitch would call them boomers, right? And like the conservatives and the skeptics, this is still 50% of the market, right? Like it's a huge percentage of the market. 1 in 2 people are just, think video games are weird or think the kind of stuff with Ninja is weird. But the way this plays out in real life is you get on a plane and someone asks what I do. Okay, this is exactly how this works. And I'll tell you how this worked, okay? So in 2012, I got on a plane to go to my esports job, and someone asked what I did. And I said, well, I play video games online. And that made no sense to them, okay? So what I could say in 2012 was, oh, I'm a YouTuber. And they might not still get that, okay? 2014 and 15, when I'm taking on CEO for CLG, I could say I run a company that has a bunch of YouTubers on it, and everybody would understand what that means. But they still wouldn't understand, like, okay, I'm a Twitch influencer. Now, if I'm on a plane in 2019, I can say, oh, have you ever heard of Ninja? And somebody goes, oh, yeah, I know who that is, right? And they know that live streaming is a medium that crosses over this chasm. That's an example of how this marketing curve actually plays out in real time with Ninja. He's managed to go over into the point where the conservatives and the skeptics are at least aware of him, which I can't express to you as how powerful that is. It's literally transcendental. It's literally what it is. It's ascending a level beyond what should be possible. And this idea is super esoteric. And like there's no principle for how this happens, because let me think about this. There's no principle for how to cross this chasm because they're literally every time I know how to explain this. Every time it gets done, it's a unique thing. So it's like it can only be done once, and then it has to be done a different way again. It's hard to explain this. It's like if you imagine like a staircase, nobody can go up it the same way. So Ninja did it his way, and then the next person that crosses that chasm will have to do it another way. And it might not be a person, it might be an organization. What I'm hoping it is it might be an esports team. It could be like 100 Thieves, or because they're like kind of on the verge, or it could be what's the other one? Super popular. I always talk about TL, right? Possibly FaZe, maybe. Hopefully it's not FaZe, but it could be. They could actually be the ones that actually do it. That would be kind of a nightmare because if FaZe crosses that barrier, then how they present themselves to this audience is going to be really questionable. But to give you an idea of like how powerful this is, so Twitch itself hasn't crossed this barrier fully, right? Twitch is definitely not a household name to like the conservative 50% audience. This is a really crazy concept. the idea that Ninja was actually able to eclipse Twitch in household name popularity in some ways is really, really crazy. And this is not uncommon that an individual crosses this chasm more than a company does, because it's easier for an individual to navigate this than it is for a single company. So brands like Tesla that have become household names in the recent years, but it's much easier for like someone like Elon to do it. Everyone knows Elon Musk, right? Not everyone knows SpaceX, and definitely not everyone knows SolarCity. So it's like Elon, it's always easier for like an individual to cross this chasm. But to give you an idea, but that is like what this is indicative of. It's basically Epic Games acknowledging that Ninja has transcended at a certain level. And that's why I think this is like a really big deal that he got this skin. It's not just like I think a lot of people might expect me to come at this from the angle of like, oh, this is a really good way to monetize influencers. This is a really good way to get influencers involved in a game. I'm actually not a very big fan of like taking the top 50 Fortnite influencers, like your Tifus and your like myths and whatever, and then just giving them all skins. I don't think that's a good idea, right? I don't think Epic Games really knows where those guys are going to be in, XYZ years. And I don't think that Epic Games necessarily, like those influencers don't necessarily have any loyalty particularly, but to that game or vice versa. So I think this is not like the start of like a big trend where you're going to see like a lot of skins come in from influencers. But what it is it's an acknowledgement of Ninja's transcendental ability to break the marketing curve lines and like do this. And it's really cool. Like, it's really cool. It's surreal for Ninja to sit here and look at himself in a game, because that's and it's also just a shout out to like, what it's so funny I misspelled Ninja and I still got it. What I talk about so often with content creation, which is just like, this was not an accident. It's like, I love going to YouTube videos and sorting by oldest and seeing that 8 years ago, this guy was consistently uploading content. And it's like, anyone that thinks that this is an overnight success, just point him right here, right? Oh, he's been doing Halo content for years. Oh, he was doing Fortnite content for years. Oh, he was doing every new game release and Destiny content and H1Z1 content, trying things, experimenting, getting better, getting more popular. And then it's like everyone knows him in his breakout moment, and then there it is, right? But this is like, and I can't go back and really look at why Ninja was the one to do this, and like it wasn't another influencer. But sure enough, it was because of really hard work and because he made this happen in that way. They even called this the Icon Series. Right? You might see a few more of these, but it's like, who is going to be iconic enough that we feel like we can represent them in our game as a fundamental pillar of what our game is? We're going to see more of this, but we're going to see it from like really, really safe and like secure positions. I love it, man. I think it's great. Ninja has done so many things that and also more importantly too, it's like Ninja's done all of this, but he's also legitimized gaming in the eye, because you have to be really careful with this audience. This audience is super. This is why I said like I hope that like FaZe like doesn't break through this, because this audience is going to be very skeptical coming in, right? They're gonna that's why they're called skeptics and conservatives, right? They're people that are like, there's an old story. I don't know how much truth there is to this, but it's a story that I like. I think they did a study of, they dropped sweet potatoes on an island with a bunch of monkeys native to the island, okay? And they were dirty sweet potatoes. They would fall into the sand, and the monkeys couldn't eat the skin because it was too tough and it was covered with sand. So the older monkeys, they looked at the potatoes and they just went about their business, right? And the younger monkeys, some of them actually picked up the potatoes and started messing with them or whatever. And a few of them actually took the potatoes and they tried to wash them. And they found out that if you wash the potatoes, you can eat them. And then they got really excited and they started telling each other about it. And the older monkeys were like way slower to actually start washing the potatoes. Eventually, like everybody sort of like did it, but you could see that like the younger people, the younger monkeys, they were much more willing to kind of like accept it and try to wash the potatoes and try it themselves than like the older monkeys like, you know, I don't know about this like new, maybe this is like a fad, maybe we'll wait for this to blow up or whatever. That's the kind of thing you're dealing with is like, so when Ninja comes in and it's like he's got this commitment to not cursing for the most part, he has a really good brand that's forward facing for the most part, and he's generally like a good representative. It's just better for gaming as a whole because like it wasn't that long ago, if you know some of the people in the chat or watching are old enough, remember, it wasn't that long ago that we had people that were, you know, making fun of us because we're nerds and we're playing video games. It wasn't cool to be a nerd. There was no way you could make full-time income off of that. That would be like unimaginable. I had so many guild leaders in Dark Age of Camelot or EverQuest 1 or World of Warcraft where we would never even imagine something like Method, where it's like you're getting paid to do world firsts and raid, and you have 100,000, 150,000 viewers doing it. You can pay a whole team of people $10,000 a month because you can monetize it through ads and digital CPM and all that stuff. That would never happen, right? So it's important that as we come into this world, that we represent ourselves well. And this is something to advocate for a lot, and I don't think can be said enough. And it's like, it's crazy that Ninja actually managed to cross this chasm, and maybe it's because of his ability to represent himself that well that he did cross this chasm. I don't know. I like it. Love talking about this kind of stuff. How much of Ninja's recent ability to transcend being a gamer or influencer do you think can be attributed to mainstream brands adopting him before he appeared on talk shows? Good question. Good question. I don't know. So that's a chicken or the egg question in a weird way, right? I think that the brands adopting... So let's just call this credibility. Let's say that it's that word. Or let's call it brand credibility, okay? And brand credibility is like your ability to be taken seriously as a brand influencer for whatever it is that you influence. So different people have different levels of brand credibility, right? I tend to have really high levels of brand credibility in terms of like marketing, content creation, and things like that. And you can see that by like if I have like really high appearance fees, people will pay me a lot to like consult with them because they know that that information is valid, right? And I've done a lot to build that brand credibility, for example. There are other areas that I don't have, most areas that I don't have brand credibility in, right? Brand credibility in like a gaming sense is like, can somebody trust you to represent the gaming industry on their show in a way that's like professional? So like, for example, Slasher that got on like Fox News and was doing like a lot of like commentary on Fox News shows, right? That's brand credibility. So brand credibility is that kind of thing that makes Adidas look at you and say, hey, you're a person that we could represent in this field because we have confidence that you'll represent us well, and because we think that you're sort of an emissary or a sort of like kind of like spokesperson, like soothsayer for this field, okay? In which in Ninja's case is like gaming, right, as a whole. A lot of things need to go into brand credibility, and this is one of the reasons why I talk a lot about brand friendliness that I think is underrated, right? Especially with my circle of friends, most of my friends don't value brand friendliness. And like Ninja is a really good example of why you should, because like if you want Adidas to look at you and if you want Ellen to pick you up, right? Like the people that are the gatekeepers for shows like that are going to look very carefully at how you represent yourself, and not just like stuff like, oh, do I curse or not, or things like that. It's going to be stuff like, how do you represent your brand on a daily basis? Do you complain about and bitch about the sort of like services and the games that you're a part of? Do you make a big deal about things and trash people publicly? Like, how do you represent yourself, right? And for Ninja, that's a very carefully curated appearance. And yes, I know like people can point to like, especially in his earlier years, he's had these times where he's lashed out or everything or whatever, right? But brands are willing to forgive that kind of stuff as long as it doesn't become like a modus operandi for you, right? Because when you're becoming an influencer, it's so easy to get there by trashing other people. It's really, really popular. Drama feeds in super well. It oils the wheel a lot. It's really easy to get there by just trashing other people, right? It would be way easier for me to build a YouTube channel, even the way that I'm building it now, if I just trash the dumb things that influencers are doing. And by the way, if you look at my early career, right, I experimented with this. This was my whole series on FaZe, where it was like, where I did like literally 5 or 6 videos on just like how dumb FaZe is as an organization and how many rules they break, how many laws they break, right? And it did incredibly well for me, especially given the context of where my YouTube was at this time. Right. I like if I look at these kind of things, I could see that I was going to be really successful doing this kind of content because I was getting like 30. So I literally did a video that was called Esports CEO Reacts to Keemstar and FaZe Bake's interview. And it got 30K views 7 months ago when my YouTube channel legitimately had 2K subscribers. So if I did those things today, so like what I'm saying is like it's not an accident that I stopped doing those things. Right. Because I made a pretty conscious decision that it's like, okay, that's going to get me a lot of popularity, but at the cost of long-term brand credibility. So, like, I stopped doing it because I wanted to personally take the sacrifice of like the greater viewership. Who by the way, like most of the people that orbit around that kind of content is not like your highest quality people anyway. And I wanted to sacrifice that for integrity, I guess you could say. And like Ninja made that same distinction. So a lot of people tend to judge people by their, I'd say their past. You got to be like really careful with that because like people are always evolving as people. Like, right? I wouldn't come and go look at a person and say, oh, you made mistakes like 3 years ago, so I think you're a shit person now. But people will do that to content creators. And so you have to be like, you have to realize like how Ninja sort of jumped across that chasm and now is like a very brand-friendly person with very few of those mishaps. And that's a big reason why he's able to cross over into these brands like Adidas and Ellen and things like that. So that there's that inherent trust, that implicit trust that comes into that. I discovered you through the whole FaZe stuff, and now I'm a fan of all the content you put out. Yep, that is awesome. And I do think I got a lot of discovery through that medium. But I also think that it's like that you should be very tempered in the way that you release that kind of content. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, because sometimes there's people that, you know, legitimately deserve to be talked about. But just in general, I think like I've moved away from doing that sort of content for the most part. When it comes to Ninja, what do you think he did differently? Conceptually, he didn't do much different from other streamers. This is a really, really long talk because we're kind of talking about two things right now. We're talking about like brand friendliness, and maybe there's like a separate talk. Last call. Thanks for jumping in on that hype train, dude. We're kind of talking about brand friendliness at the same time as we're sort of talking about like Ninja's success. The truth is, I don't know what differentiated Ninja. I don't think no one does. I might be able to do a research project on it and get a little bit closer to it. But it's hard to say, man. Sometimes a lot of it is just opportunity and right place, right time type of stuff. Particularly, there's a really good book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called Outliers. And Outliers is a book about successful people in the sense that we tend to think that success is the result of innate talent. I think that's sort of like the first tier of people that think about success. That's like the lowest tier is people that think that success is a result of innate talent. And you could really quickly dispel that, right? And then I think there's a good number of other people that after that think that maybe success is the result of like hard work and dedication, which it undoubtedly is. But if you read a book like Outliers, you start thinking about it. One of the things you realize is that success, to a large extent, is actually just due to the time frame you were in, like the moment that you're in. A really good example of this, if you want to look at it, is if you take a look at all of the Silicon Valley like top executives. So like all the people that are now running companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple, right? And you look at their birth dates. Well, all of them were born between the years of 1954 and 1956. Why? Well, because that happened to be the most optimal time to get in on the ground floor of like programming and learning how like the computers were working. So Bill Gates as a person, if you look at his history, is really interesting. It turned out that he was one of the only people on Earth at the time who had consistent access to a computer first and then used it to do work and to learn how to program. And it's really fascinating. You can read a book like Outliers if you're interested in this. But what Malcolm Gladwell does is he breaks down a lot of these like really successful people in their fields and just realizes that they were just in the right time. I mean, literally, they were in maybe like a 1-year period where they just were on a super optimal time frame, and that happened to be everything that connected together to get that person to be in that optimal place. So I think that if we actually like, you'll have to look back on Ninja in like 10 years, and we'll probably see that, right? It's like now look, you've got to do the hard work to set yourself up to be in that position. So I think Ninja put in the time and put in the work and did the content and did everything right. But it was probably like the fact that I'm sure if you could look back on, because we don't have a big enough history of time right now, but if we were able to expand this time period out and we look at it's 2030, and we go back and we look at Tfue, and we look at Ninja, and we look at Myth, and we look at all these like really big Fortnite influencers who became multimillionaires, I'm willing to bet that they had a similar strategy, and they all sort of came up at about the same time. So I think that these guys becoming like insanely successful at Fortnite, they did that because they were able to capitalize on that time, but they also did everything correctly, and they also put in, their 10,000 hours. Yeah, so I think that's like all I have to say about Ninja. I don't know. It's a lot of all the important points that I wanted to reach were made. I think oh hey, what's up, Evix? Thank you very much for the 2. Just missed the hype train, but yeah, you still got in there, man. Thank you. There's a little bit of magic to it, and I don't know. I just think it's really cool. I think it's cool that Fortnite. I agree with the decision by Epic Games too. Like, absolutely, Ninja's in the position where he deserves this skin, but you're not going to see this that often. It's going to be pretty rare. It was really it's really iconic of the times.